I had always considered myself a skeptic, someone who prided themselves on their rationality and logical thinking. After all, I'd spent 5 years traveling to countless haunted locations with my paranormal investigation team, and all that time, I had never once encountered anything that couldn't be explained away by science or common sense. Yet, as I stood before the decaying Drayton Manor on that crisp moonlit night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to experience something that would change everything. We arrived well after midnight, the air unnaturally cold despite the warmth of the summer night. Tom, Sarah, Craig, and I stepped out of the van, our breath hanging in the air as we made our way to the front door. The manor had been abandoned for decades, the locals whispering about its dark past. Stories of rituals, tragedies, and ghostly happenings. Most of the time, I took these tales with a grain of salt. People like their ghost stories, and I was more than happy to debunk them when given the chance. But something about this place felt different. The mansion was imposing, its towering stone walls covered in ivy, the once grand architecture now crumbling and forgotten. As we made our way inside, the door creaked loudly on its hinges, the sound echoing in the dead silence of the house. My flashlight flickered as I turned it on, casting long, jittery shadows across the entrance hall. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed by time, as if this house had been frozen in the moment it had been abandoned. "Let's set up in the library first," I suggested, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I had to keep my composure. The team was counting on me to be the steady one, the one who wouldn't let fear cloud my judgment. Tom nodded and led the way, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floors. Craig set up the cameras while Sarah unpacked the EMF detectors. As I moved to the corner of the room, my gaze drifted over the faded wallpaper, the peeling edges of the once opulent decor. It was all so silent here, too silent. Then a sound broke the stillness, a soft whisper, so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind. I looked at the others, but no one else seemed to have heard it. I brushed it off, assuming it was just the house settling, a natural noise that came with its age. We had heard these kinds of sounds in every abandoned place we'd explored. But as we moved deeper into the house, the whispers grew louder, not in a clear, coherent way, but in soft, indistinct murmurs, as though the walls themselves were speaking. My heart began to race. This wasn't just wind or the house shifting. Something was wrong. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice low and tinged with unease. I nodded, but didn't say anything. My rational mind was trying to make sense of it, to find an explanation, but nothing seemed to fit. The whispers continued, persistent, coming from all directions, as though the very walls of the manor were alive, breathing, watching. We made our way to the library, where the air felt even colder and the whispers seemed to intensify. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, their meanings unclear, their forms almost hypnotic. I crouched down, shining my flashlight over the carvings, trying to make sense of them. My mind raced as I thought of every possible explanation, from ancient languages to ritualistic markings. Suddenly, Sarah's flashlight flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that made the symbols seem to move. I froze, watching in horror as the markings shifted, as if they were alive, writhing and twisting on the walls. My skin prickled. This wasn't natural. And then I heard it, a voice, not from one of the others, but from somewhere deep within the walls themselves. It was soft, barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. "Lena, help us." I felt a chill run down my spine. My name. My blood ran cold. I turned to Sarah, but she looked just as terrified as I felt. We exchanged a glance, and in that moment, we both knew something was terribly wrong. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. But it was too late. The air grew even colder, and the house seemed to come alive with the sound of faint, distant footsteps. Footsteps that weren't our own. We rushed toward the attic, hoping to find some clue that would explain what was happening. Maybe there was a logical reason for the strange happenings, something we could document and investigate further. The attic was a dusty, forgotten space, filled with old furniture and boxes covered in cobwebs. But it wasn't the dusty, old things that caught our attention. It was the photographs. As I scanned the room, my flashlight landed on a collection of old portraits hanging on the wall. The Drayton family, no doubt beautiful, well-dressed people, their eyes cold and lifeless. But as I studied them closer, I noticed something unsettling. Their eyes, they seemed to follow us, no matter where we moved. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I stepped back, but the shadows shifted and I saw it. A figure, standing in the corner of the room. A woman in white, her form glowing faintly in the darkness. She didn't look like a traditional ghost, like the others we had encountered over the years. She wasn't menacing or angry. Instead, there was a calmness to her presence, as though she didn't belong to this world, yet wasn't entirely out of place either. She glided toward us, her steps soundless, her eyes locked on mine. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me as she drew near. Despite the horror that had gripped me only moments before, I felt an unexpected comfort, as if this was what I was meant to experience. She smiled softly, the warmth of her gaze piercing the chill that had gripped my heart. "You must help me," she said, her voice gentle, melodic. I was a protector of this family. I tried to save them, but I couldn't. The fire, her voice trailed off, the sadness in her eyes palpable. Now I am trapped here, waiting for someone to release me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. As if sensing my hesitation, the woman spoke again. "You are not here to fear us. You are here to help us find peace." The room seemed to close in around me as her figure began to fade, the soft glow of her presence dissipating into the shadows. I didn't want her to go, but as she disappeared, I understood. She wasn't here to haunt us. She was lost, bound to the house, to the tragedy that had claimed the family she had loved so dearly. I looked at the others, and I could see that they too had been moved by the encounter. We weren't dealing with vengeful spirits or malicious forces. These were souls trapped by a past they couldn't escape, souls that longed for release, for peace. I made a vow that night. I would return to Drayton Manor, and I would help the woman in white, help her find the release she so desperately needed. The team left the manor that night, our hearts heavy but filled with understanding. It wasn't fear that had driven us to this place, but compassion. And it was compassion that would lead us back to finally put the past to rest. The night had already fallen by the time we arrived at Coldwater Manor. The estate loomed before us, its dark silhouette barely visible against a vast, moonless sky. The mansion seemed to suck in all the light, casting long, twisted shadows across the overgrown grounds. The air was thick, not just with the humidity of the evening, but with an unshakable feeling that we weren't truly welcome here. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, the tires crunched under the weight of silence. The estate was old, long abandoned, but somehow it felt as though it had never truly let go of its past. I stood outside the rusted gates, my hand on the cold, wrought iron fence. I had been on dozens of paranormal investigations in my career, but something about this place made my skin crawl. Mike Thompson, the leader of our team, walked up beside me. His steady presence, usually a comfort, did little to ease the unease creeping into my bones. "This is Coldwater Manor," Mike said, his voice steady, but even he couldn't hide the faint tremor in his tone. "A place known for its restless spirits. Whatever's here, it's powerful." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed in that kind of talk. After all, I had spent years chasing shadows and searching for proof of the supernatural. But Coldwater Manor, it was different. It had a reputation, a dark one. Whispers of ghosts, paranormal activity, and unsolved mysteries surrounded it. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to it than just a decaying house. We entered the manor with our equipment in tow. The floor creaked underfoot, the ancient wood groaning as though the house itself was waking up, protesting our intrusion. The air inside was stale, cold, and musty, with a heavy layer of dust settling on every surface. The walls, once grand and ornate, were peeling, revealing the decaying bones of a once beautiful home. The grand living room was the first stop on our investigation. It was vast, the ceiling stretching far above us, casting shadows in every corner. The fireplace had long since turned to ash, and the furniture, though aged, was still oddly positioned as though someone had recently occupied the space. It was as though the manor was frozen in time, an eerie stillness clinging to the air. I set up my camera in the far corner while the rest of the team arranged our other equipment: motion detectors, EVP recorders, and infrared cameras. We tried to shake off the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Every whisper of the wind outside seemed to whisper secrets to us, secrets we weren't sure we wanted to hear. The temperature dropped in an instant, and a thick fog seemed to rise from the floor, curling around our feet. Something was here, and it wasn't happy about our presence. At first, the usual equipment glitches started. Lights flickered and buzzed. Static crackled through our radios, and the temperature dropped further until it was impossible to ignore the cold spots in the room. Something wasn't right. As we moved deeper into the house, the strange phenomena escalated. Doors that were once firmly shut creaked open on their own. A sudden gust of wind would send a stack of papers flying across the room. A faint whisper echoed through the hallway. Indistinguishable at first, but unmistakably there. That's when we found the journal. The old leather-bound book was tucked away in the corner of the library. I picked it up carefully, the weight of it surprising given its age. Flipping through the yellow pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. The handwriting was elegant. The ink faded but still legible. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor, the last of the Coldwater family, to live here. As I read on, the story began to unfold. Eleanor had been a kind and loving mother, her devotion to her family unshakable. The mansion had once been filled with laughter and warmth, but tragedy struck when Eleanor's family died under mysterious circumstances. Heartbroken and alone, Eleanor had passed away in the house, and her spirit, it seemed, had never left. I paused at a particular entry in the journal. It mentioned that Eleanor's attachment to the house was not out of anger or bitterness, but out of love, a desperate need to protect what she had lost. The journal spoke of strange events occurring, things moving on their own, whispers in the dark, and feelings of warmth and protection that would sometimes overcome those who stayed here. It seemed that Eleanor's spirit had remained, not as a vengeful ghost, but as a guardian, trying to protect the home she had cherished in life. We continued through the manor, each room more unnerving than the last. The further we went, the more intense the sensations became. The air grew thicker, the shadows darker. As I walked into the kitchen to check the temperature readings, I was startled by a soft voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. "Sarah," it said, but there was no one around. I spun around, my heart racing, and then I saw her. A figure stood in the corner of the room, an ethereal woman, her form faint but undeniably there. She was tall, dressed in a faded gown, her long, dark hair cascading around her shoulders. But what struck me was a warmth that radiated from her, a strange and overwhelming feeling of safety and comfort that seemed to fill the space. Her eyes, deep, sorrowful eyes, met mine, and for a moment I felt no fear. Instead, I felt as though I had been found, as though I had been embraced by a long-lost family member. "Eleanor?" I whispered, unsure what was happening. The figure nodded slowly, a sad, peaceful smile crossed her face. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice soft and maternal, almost a lullaby. "I'm not here to hurt you." I backed away slowly, still unsure if I should run or stay. But the presence, warm and comforting, kept me rooted to the spot. I couldn't move. She wasn't just any spirit. She was something more, something that belonged here. And yet, there was something deeply tragic about her existence, trapped in a place she once loved, with no one left to care for her. The others came rushing in when they heard me, and the figure slowly faded from view, leaving only the lingering sensation of her presence. They didn't see her, but they felt it too, the air still thick with Eleanor's energy. I couldn't explain what just happened, but I knew, deep down, that Eleanor was not a malevolent spirit. She was a mother, a protector, lost in her grief and longing to guard the home that had been her sanctuary. We spent the rest of the night exploring the manor, documenting everything and experiencing more unexplainable phenomena. Furniture moved on its own, and we captured footage of shadows shifting in the corners of the rooms. But throughout it all, there was a constant warmth in the air, as though Eleanor was watching over us, ensuring we were safe. In the early hours of the morning, as we stood in the living room. I felt her presence once more. The air was calm, peaceful, and Eleanor's spirit appeared before us, her figure glowing softly in the dim light. She gave us one last look, a gentle, reassuring smile, before she faded into the ether. Coldwater Manor, once a place of fear and legend, was no longer a house haunted by terror. It had been transformed into a place of peace, a place where a mother's love still lingered, guarding the home she had cherished in life. As we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor had finally found the closure she needed, and in doing so, had set the manor free. It was no longer just a haunted house. It was a home once more,